Hi Tarot Tube. Today is January 10th, 2018. I will be working again with the Small Spells craft deck. This is made by an artist out in California. I'm going to do another Dyadic Cross, and we're going to keep it general. We're going to see where the cards lead us. Here we go. The Hermit is the heart of the matter. Five of Pentacles is the foil. The High Priestess is our past. That's one of my birth cards. The Fool. I'm excited to talk about the Fool. The Fool is our root. And Temperance is our aspiration. And the Tower is the most likely outcome. Now, let's begin by talking about the Hermit. The Hermit represents sort of like the call of the wilderness. If you've ever read the book Into the Wild with Chris McCandless is the Hermit. The Hermit is somebody who decides that society doesn't have much to offer them, and so instead they seek isolation to try and discover sort of like the secrets of the universe. And in this image we see an owl, which is appropriate. Owls tend to be pretty solitary, and when we look up here there's like a bunch of constellations. Those I think represent the secrets of the universe that the Hermit is trying to access. Now, there is general question in the tarot community about whether or not the Hermit actually has access to these secrets. I tend to believe that he does. In Rider Waite we see him, holding up like a lantern, which I think represents, guiding the path forward, lighting up and illuminating his questions. And so when we see this in a read, I think you're at a time in your life where you're considering something like this. You might not literally be living the life of a monk or whatever, but you are interested in trying to achieve more me time. You're trying to, actualize yourself personally. But what's blocking you is money. And so Five of Pentacles is all about, destitution, being poor, this kind of thing. Now, this one's a little bit cute. It's got a mouse. And I believe that might even be Pizza Rat, I don't know. And up here there are 5 diamonds that are sort of like outside of his reach. But this one tells us that like your biggest fear in making a leap like this is that you're worried that you may become poor, or you just don't really have the money to do it. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is, instead of like making like the actual leap into like the purely ascetic life, just try to find some more me time. Give yourself like 10 minutes in the morning to do some personal meditation, some mindfulness type activities, and you'll see a lot of good results from this. You might become a more balanced person, which is something that you're really interested in doing, and it's gonna be really important moving forward. Now, this is particularly relevant to the Fool here, and in my tarot club, which I just started going to the other day, we talked about the Fool in great detail. So, who is the Fool? A lot of people see the Fool and they think of idiot. They think of the village idiot. But even the village idiot held sort of like a sacred, role in the hearts of people. The village idiot was someone who was sort of like touched by the heavens, and this was like, a bit of a blessing, honestly. But generally when we look at the Fool, I think of sort of like the primordial life breath. By tradition, we say that the Fool sort of came into existence all on his own, and you know, from no origin whatsoever, and the entire world before him is sort of just like crafted as he steps. In Rider-Waite, we see him sort of like at the edge of a cliff, and people go, "Oh no, he's such a fool! He's about to step right off that cliff." But the reality of the Fool is that if he were to take this step forward, he wouldn't fall. What would happen is Earth in front of him would materialize to accept his foot. And so the Fool represents the ultimate unburdening. This is beginning a new adventure where your responsibilities aren't what's important, but instead, you know, the journey that you're about to take, the personal actualization that you attempt to seek, these are the important things for you. And so this is the position that we call the root, and I think it's sort of a piece of advice that's going to help us, you know, live a more balanced and interesting lifestyle without worrying so much about the destitution. Today, it's a weekday, so there's a good chance that you know exactly what you're going to be doing today. If I asked you to write down what was going to happen today, I think you'd have a pretty good sense of the way it would look. Most people do. But the question is, what if you didn't do that? What if instead of, you know, taking the subway into work, sitting at your desk and, you know, doing whatever it is you do, what if you just left? What if you just went to Tahiti? You know, you probably have a credit card, you probably have the amount of money to accomplish at least these goals in the short term. And that sort of free energy, that's the Fool. So keep that in mind. The Fool's a great card. It's the beginning of our journey. Something new is happening. And you might want to consider taking like a different tack in life somehow. Now, when we look at the past, we have the High Priestess here. Right? High Priestess, one of my birth cards. She is the strongest psychic of all of the cards, up there with Queen of Cups. She is considered to be the keeper of internal worlds. And so when we see the High Priestess, that means we may have recently experienced some kind of like an awakening. And I think that awakening is the energy that's causing you to want to be more like the Hermit. That awakening wasn't actually the complete access to the information. There's question as to whether the High Priestess knows everything that she's guarding, or whether she just guards it. But you had a glimpse. You had a hint of what the universe is all about, and you're very interested to learn more. And so I think that's why you're seeking answers in solitude. But again, we've got this problem here that you don't want to be poor. And that's reasonable. Now, also worth noting, in some older decks, the Fool is sort of drawn as like a town beggar. There's like a dog like pulling down his pants. I don't know why they changed it, but I like the new image better. Now, Temperance, I've talked about Temperance plenty of times, but Temperance is all about balancing. It's about internal balance, and it's trying to find a balance between like the higher and lower levels of consciousness, and also trying to find balance between all of your passions and where all of your energy comes from. Now, these are your aspirations, and so I think that we see a lot of the same kind of energy here. You know, you aspire to a greater sense of personal balance. The way you think that you can accomplish that is by living a more ascetic life. The reason you feel this way is because you've had a glimpse at the internal truth. And at the root of all of this is sort of like a desire to be more like the Fool, the desire to be living an unburdened, freed life, true freedom. Now, one thing I'd like to point out about the Fool is that, given that he's walking around and the world is being created in front of him, and you know nothing exists until he steps forward, you have to ask yourself if he's ever seen himself. He's probably never been able to look in the mirror, and so he hasn't actually had the chance to be sort of like self-reflective. You can imagine the fool screaming, I am, but he doesn't really have a good sense for what that means. Now, I'm recalling the story of Flatland, which is sort of like a, I guess you could call it a parable about multidimensionality. And there's one creature in Flatland who is a zero-dimensional creature. He is simply a point. He is all that exists in his zero-dimensional universe. And essentially, the way this character experiences life, he is unaware that anything else could exist. His entire universe is only his consciousness. In many ways, that's the fool. And so you might imagine that the fool's a little bit selfish, but the word selfish doesn't really have meaning in his universe. I again want to stress the concept of just sort of like unburdened. Now the tower represents a catastrophic change, and catastrophic here doesn't have to have like a negative connotation. It just means it is a substantial change. You are in the near future, or you know maybe it's a little bit longer, you are going to experience some kind of a drastic change to the way you live your life. This comes back to my story about, you know, spending your day differently. You'll be spending a lot of your days differently once this tower comes to fruition. Something is on the horizon. We've been seeing a lot of this kind of imagery lately. Everything really seems to be coming together for you. You know, you've set something up, things are in motion, and some big change is going to occur. The tower can often be scary for people, but it's important to remember that, you know, change is not always bad. In this case, I think you're looking at a really good change, where you're going to be living a more interesting, more balanced, more spiritual life, and you'll be unburdened by the concern for wealth. As always, that was Tarot 2. Please like and subscribe. I am your host,